Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the American Man Podcast. We are going through the Bill of Rights. I'm here with my son Elijah, and we are on the Third Amendment, the very rarely cited, quoted, or used Third Amendment. So, Elijah, why don't you go ahead and read that for us?
No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house, without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law.
All right, so what does that mean to you?
A soldier can't just go to someone's house and say, all right, feed me. I'm going to station here until further orders or whatever.
Right.
They're not allowed to just invade a home, basically.
Yep, and really, the phrase "be quartered" at a person's house, that's more of a establishment directive. In other words, the military can't say, or the government can't say, okay, now we're going to put soldiers in your houses. So it's less about the individual soldier walking up to someone's house and going in the door, and it's more about the army saying we're going to start putting people in your houses and making you feed them and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting, when you look at the order of the First Amendment or the amendments, and the first two that we talked about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about the context, and they just had the Revolutionary War, and they had all these grievances against England and these things that were happening. Why do you think this third one was so high on the list?
Because it happened a lot in England.
Well, not in England. England did it in the colonies,
Oh, yeah.
right? Before the war. So this was fresh in their minds. This was something that had happened to them very recently, and they wanted it to be clear that it would never happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is a caveat here, which is, but in a manner prescribed by law. Um, and this has never really been challenged. Congress has never passed a law that says, soldiers, should be quartered in people's houses, things like that. I don't suspect that this would hold up. But it is interesting. There's a phrase there that says, but in a manner prescribed by law. In other words, Congress could make a law that says where and how soldiers should be quartered, which is generally at a military base. Um, again, this has never been challenged, but is it hypothetical that Congress could make a law that allowed some sort of emergency quartering? I'm not sure. I don't think so. But again, it's never happened again. Now, to be clear, there were times during the Civil War when soldiers would come through towns and they would take things. They would essentially pillage, the enemy towns and cities. And the reason that's a little different was because at that point we'd had
two different sides.
Yeah, two different sides, and what's a succession movement, which means seceding or breaking away. So they were considered more enemy territory versus we're putting soldiers in our own citizens' homes, even though that did happen during the Civil War. So this has not really been tested, but it's kind of a bedrock, and it sets the tone for the next amendment, which really bases a lot of our law off of this idea that our home is our castle, and it's ours, and it's a place where we can be safe and free. So let's go ahead and move on. I don't want to spend too much time on the Third Amendment. So go ahead and read the Fourth Amendment.
The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized.
All right. So what does that mean to you?
Um, just like police officers or soldiers or whatever, can't go into your home and search your house, take things, um, or stuff like that.
Okay. Yep. Yep. And that's, I mean, that's the very basic part of it is they can't just walk in your door, right? Do you know what a warrant is? A warrant is a document that's been signed by a judge that says there's some sort of authority for the police or law enforcement, whoever it is, to do a specific thing. And today we see generally two types of warrants. We see search warrants and we see arrest warrants. So a search warrant says, that the police can come into your house and search for this particular thing. An arrest warrant says that the police are allowed to take you into custody and arrest you for, a certain crime or suspicion of a certain crime. So what's the standard? What does the government have to show in order to get that warrant? And it's in the Fourth Amendment there.
They have to have a purpose for you, or for sure searching your house, I think.
Okay, and what does it say? No warrants shall issue. What comes after that?
But upon probable cause
Okay, what does that mean to you? What's probable cause?
that they have a certain suspicion or probable cause, which is like probably a cause for this, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, and that word you use, suspicion, is good. It's a particularized suspicion, and it says supported by oath or affirmation. So what does that mean? That's someone is telling the police, "Hey, I saw this thing happening in this house," or they get a police report or a call, or the police are investigating something and they see someone bringing what they believe to be drugs into a house. So then the police would sign this oath or affirmation for the judge saying, I saw these things and that constitutes probable cause. So please let us go in and search the house. Now, even within the Fourth Amendment, even when they have that right to come in, the Fourth Amendment, and this is again, the founding fathers were very, very cognizant of these sort of overbroad powers that the king was using against them. So read that last part where it says, "and particularly describing."
And particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized.
All right. So what does that mean to you?
They have to describe the exact place that they're going to search and the things that they think they should investigate or take or whatever.
Right. So let's say the police are investigating a stolen elephant. All right. There was a zoo in town, or a zoo that is missing an elephant, and they think that a person stole the elephant. And on that person's property, there's a big garage, and then there's a house with lots of small rooms and closets and things like that. When they're doing that warrant, do you think that they can go in and search the closet? What about the refrigerator?
No.
The elephants in the refrigerator?
No.
Can you fit an elephant in, a little a root cellar?
Nope.
Or things like that? No, no. So they have their search is going to be limited to the thing that they're searching for, and it has to be reasonable that it would be where they're looking,
Such as the garage.
like the garage or the living room, right? Or something like that, where they have to keep their search within the confines of the reasonableness, and they have to describe what they're looking for. They can't just say, to the judge, "Hey, we think this person's doing something illegal. Let us go into their house and look."
They have to
Right.
say more like, "We think this person stole an elephant." Or
Correct.
something.
Right. We saw elephant tracks leading up to. There's a missing elephant. We saw elephant tracks walking up to the garage on this house, and we heard loud noises coming from within the garage. So, Judge, please sign this warrant to let us search the garage. That's what a valid search warrant should be. All right. So that's the very basic premise of the Fourth Amendment. Now, throughout our legal history, that has been expanded, and lots of cases, have been ruled on about that. So let me ask you a question. What if you're driving in your car and you get pulled over, and the police think that um, you have drugs because maybe you're acting funny, and maybe from whatever reason they smell something that smells like drugs. The Fourth Amendment doesn't specifically say car. It says secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects.
Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't have cars back then.
That's right. They didn't have, but they had horses, right? And that's where these words persons and effects come into play. Okay, so this is kind of an old way of using this word, but someone's effects are the things that they have with them, right? And your person is your body and like your clothes, what you're wearing.
They may have a backpack, or the horse may have a saddlebag or something.
Correct. So even it would even extend to those things. Now, there have been some exceptions to this Fourth Amendment, because you can imagine how hard it would be for police to ever get anything done if they heard, let's say they pull someone over and they hear noises coming from the trunk saying, help me, this person kidnapped me. Do you think they need to go and get a warrant to open the trunk and search the person's car?
Not if they hear a voice saying, help me,
Right.
they kidnapped me.
Right. So there's a number of what we call exceptions to the warrant requirement. And not to go too far down the road, but some of the main ones are if they have reasonable suspicion that a felony, a serious crime is being committed right now, right, like a kidnapping. Exigent circumstances. So let's say they're chasing a guy, an armed robber, and the robber runs into someone's house. Do they have to stop at the door and knock and say, can I please come in? And if the guy says no, then they have to go get a warrant.
Or hey dude, you go get a warrant while I bust down the store.
Yeah, right. What if it's 2 a.m. and the judge is asleep, right? Certain things like that.
Yeah.
And there is, this has been expanded to people's cars, but there's also something that's called a search pursuant to an arrest. So if they arrest you for something, they're allowed to look around for evidence of that crime. Again, it has to be particularized to the crime that they think has been committed. They're allowed to search your car if they seize the car. Like if you're in an accident and they tow the car, or they arrest you and they take the car to the police lot, they're allowed to search the car then. And the reason, they say, well, what if there's a bomb in the car? If there's safety reasons, they're allowed to, it's called a search incident to arrest. So they're allowed to, pat you down and search you if they arrest you, to make sure you don't have any guns or weapons, things like that. So there's some exceptions to this. But a lot of the current arguments come from technology. All right. So what would you think if the police didn't go in your house, but they sat out on the street and they have a device that's listening into your house? Like one of those like megaphone things you hold up to your ear, and you have like the little the little dish that picks up noises.
Well, if that was pointed at my house, then I'd be a little bit creeped out.
Why is that? Why would you feel creeped out?
Because they're listening in my house.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in there, maybe my family or something.
And you kind of feel like you're supposed to feel safe in your house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so what the courts have developed is this idea of, it's called this reasonable expectation of privacy. Okay. And one of the cases that this came up in was the police had these cameras that picked up heat signals, these infrared cameras that almost like a night scope, right, where it picked up heat signatures. And they could tell from looking at this person's house that the person had an abnormal amount of high powered lamps on in the house. And they used that information to get a warrant to search the house for growing drugs, right? So what this person had was all these lamps that basically like creating sunlight to grow, marijuana plants, which is a drug. And so the question then becomes, when are the police allowed to use technology that is readily available? We could all go out and buy infrared cameras or drones, right, or listening devices and things like that. And the courts really pushed back on the police using that type of thing without a warrant to begin with, right? So again, that expectation of privacy. It even extended, and you won't know what this is, but a phone booth, right? A phone booth they used to have before we had cell phones, and you had landlines, and if you were out in public,
I know what a
you've
phone booth
seen
is.
a phone booth, but you never had any reason to use one. But there was a guy who was using a telephone booth to I forget if he was calling people for drug deals or something. I don't quite remember what it was.
The
There's
operator.
Mr. Katz though, Mr. Katz, Katz, and they had tapped that phone. They had put a listening device in that phone booth. And the court said no, you have a reasonable expectation of privacy within a phone booth. So the government can't just always do what they want when they want, even as soon as you walk out of your house. And now this is a really complicated area of law. There's a lot that goes into it. There's something called the plain view doctrine, where if you have if you have a pile of drugs in your front lawn and the police drive past and they see it, they can go onto your property and investigate that, right? It's in plain view. There's no, again, that expectation of privacy idea comes up. So that's where we kind of have evolved in terms of our legal system. There's a lot of exceptions to it. A lot of cases are argued about whether the police had probable cause to initiate a stop, to do a search, to get a warrant, and things like that. But the basic idea, to come back to, very much like no quartering soldiers in your house, is the same. It's the core concept that this is your home, and in a country that was founded on the idea of freedom, we don't want the government to be able to just come into your home and do what they want whenever they want. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any questions?
Nope.
All right, sounds good. Well, next time we will move on to the Fifth Amendment, which is quite the doozy. But for now, that's all.